While I don't put any stock in supernatural claims, I have to admit that around this time of year, there is one thing that really scares me. Ah! Sorry, I couldn't resist. But on with the topic. Halloween, in modern day, is the time to fear and revere all things dark and deadly. A time for costumed cavorting and kids collecting candy. This celebration has fascinating ancient origins. But moreover, I think its evolution serves as a great illustration of how organized religion attempts to control people, and more importantly, how religion will eventually lose that battle to secular society. Halloween's origins date back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. The Celts, who lived about 2,000 years ago in what is now Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France, celebrated their new year on November 1st. This day marked the end of summer and the harvest, and the beginning of the dark, cold winter, a time of year that was often associated with human death. The Celts believed that on the night before the new year, the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred. On the night of October 31st, they celebrated Samhain when it was believed that the ghosts of the dead returned to the earth. In addition to making mischief and damaging crops, the Celts thought that the presence of spirits made it easier for the Druids to make predictions about the future. For a people completely dependent on what was, at the time, a very unpredictable natural world, these prophecies were an important source of comfort and direction during the long dark winter to come. To commemorate the event, Druids built huge bonfires where the people gathered to burn animals and crops as sacrifices to the Celtic deities. The Celts wore costumes, typically animal heads and skins, and attempted to tell each other's fortunes. When the celebration was over, they relit their hearth fires from the sacred bonfire to help protect them during the coming winter. Now, by the middle of the 1st century, the Roman Empire had conquered the majority of Celtic territory. In the course of the 400 years that they ruled the Celtic lands, 2 Roman festivals were combined with the traditional Celtic celebration. There was Feralia, a day when the Romans traditionally commemorated the passing of the dead, in addition to a day to honor Pomona, the goddess of fruit. The symbol of Pomona is the apple, and probably explains the tradition of bobbing for apples. On May 13th, 609 AD, Pope Boniface IV dedicated the Pantheon in Rome to honor all Christian martyrs, and the Catholic feast of All Martyrs' Day was established in the Western Church. By the 9th century, the influence of Christianity had spread throughout the Celtic lands, where it gradually blended with and supplanted the older Celtic rites. Pope Gregory III later expanded the festival to include all saints as well as all martyrs, and moved the observance from May 13th to November 1st. The Church was clearly attempting to replace the Celtic Festival of the Dead with a related but church-sanctioned holiday. Now, like all Christian holidays, All Saints' Day and the night before, All Hallows' Eve, later to become known as Halloween, were spawned by hijacking older traditions. In colonial New England, the celebration of Halloween was extremely limited because of the rigid Protestant belief system there. Halloween was much more common in Maryland and the southern colonies. As the beliefs and customs of different European ethnic groups, as well as the American Indians, meshed, a distinctly American version of Halloween began to emerge. The first celebrations included public events held to celebrate the harvest, where neighbors would share stories of the dead, tell each other's fortunes, dance, and sing. Colonial Halloween festivities also featured the telling of ghost stories and mischief-making of all kinds. By the middle of the 19th century, annual autumn festivities were common, but Halloween was not yet celebrated everywhere in the country. In the second half of the 19th century, America was flooded with millions of new immigrants, particularly Irish, fleeing Ireland's potato famine in 1846, and they helped to popularize the celebration of Halloween nationally. Taking from Irish and English traditions, Americans began to dress up in costumes and go house to house asking for food or money, a practice that eventually became today's trick-or-treat tradition. In the late 1800s, there was a move in America to mold Halloween into a holiday more about community and neighborly get-togethers than about ghosts, pranks, and witchcraft. At the turn of the century, Halloween parties for both children and adults became the most common way to celebrate the day. Parties focused on games, foods of the season, and festive costumes. Parents were encouraged by newspapers and community leaders to take anything frightening or grotesque out of Halloween celebrations. Because of these efforts, Halloween lost most of its superstitious and religious overtones by the beginning of the 20th century. By the 1920s and 30s, Halloween had become a secular but community-centered holiday, with parades and town-wide parties as the featured entertainment. By the 1950s, Halloween had evolved into a holiday directed mainly at the young, due to the high numbers of young children during the 50s baby boom. Parties moved from town civic centers into the classroom or home, where they could be more easily accommodated. Between 1920 and 1950, the centuries-old practice of trick-or-treating was also revived. Trick-or-treating was a relatively inexpensive way for an entire community to share the Halloween celebration. In theory, families could also prevent tricks being played on them by providing the neighborhood children with small treats. A new American tradition was born, and it's continued to grow. Today, Americans spend an estimated $6 billion annually on Halloween, making it the country's second largest commercial holiday, and entirely secular. And that makes for a very happy Halloween. But if you long for the good old days of animal sacrifice and ancestor worship,